Senator from Connecticut.
Thank you so much, Madam President. I ask unanimous consent that the Senate proceed to the immediate consideration of the following bills en bloc. Calendar number 276, Senate 1088. Calendar 297, Senate 1059. Calendar 301, Senate 432. Calendar 303, Senate 608. Calendar 611. Senate 4129, and calendar 645, Senate 5136.
Is there an objection to proceeding to the measures en bloc? Without objection, the Senate will proceed en bloc.
I ask unanimous consent that the committee reported substitute amendment, where applicable, be agreed to. The Blumenthal substitute amendment to Senate 5136, which is at the desk, be considered and agreed to. The bills as amended, if amended, be considered read a third time and passed, and that the motions to reconsider be considered made and laid upon the table en bloc.
Without objection.
Thank you, Madam President. I'm going to say a few words, and then others who have supported these bills, such as Senator Cornyn, Senator Hoban, Senator Welch, will speak to others as well. And the bill that I am very gratified and grateful that this body has now approved is Senate 5136, Plum Island Preservation Study Act, with the amendment that we just approved as well. Very simply, I've been working on this issue for a long time. Plum Island has been there for a long time. Indigenous people treasured Plum Island, 800 acres with plant and animal species, thriving seal population, species that now are endangered like the piping plover and the roseate tern, and over the years, two significant locations, Fort Terry and the Plum Island Lighthouse. It was a treasure then, it's a treasure now. I haven't been working on it for as long as, obviously, it has been regarded as a treasure. But over the years that I have worked on it now, more than a decade, with Majority Leader Schumer, Senator Gillibrand, and Senator Murphy, as well as state and local stakeholders and countless advocates, we've come to the realization that we need to preserve Plum Island. Those 800 acres are in the midst of one of the most densely populated areas in the United States, and Plum Island is a home to those really valuable species of wildlife and habitat, an ecosystem that really supports wildlife up and down the East Coast. For example, when populations of birds come there to rest and nest. And we're not going to make 500 acres, let alone 800 acres of important ecological habitat in the middle of Long Island Sound if it is lost. And it has been threatened with loss because it has served as a site for a research facility, biological research, classified mostly. I have visited it, and that research facility is going to be moved to Kansas. And the question has been, what happens now to Plum Island? The possibility of commercial development or residential buildings has been there from time to time, and the requirement existed that Plum Island be sold when the research facility moved. In 2020, Congress successfully repealed the requirement to sell Plum Island and prevented a private developer from coming to develop it and destroy the really enormous ecological and environmental values that it provides. But stopping this sale was not enough. I've continued to push for a permanent preservation outcome for Plum Island, ensuring that the island is protected for generations to come. Earlier this year, I was proud to introduce a pair of bills that would require our federal agencies to work internally and help determine the future of the island. Both of these bills passed out of committee with bipartisan support, and there is bipartisan support for this measure, as there should be, because it is about our environmental future and the preservation of open space and a rare resource for the nation. Passage of today's legislation marks a monumental stride toward conserving Plum Island. This measure will require the United States Department of Interior to determine how to designate Plum Island as a unit of the Department of Interior and how to preserve it for the use of people generations to come and protect it from development to conserve it for people to use recreationally, to make sure that it's available for wildlife that can be studied and observed and enjoyed by the people of Connecticut, New York, and all around the country. I've worked closely with the Department of Interior on how this study should be done, and I want to thank the department for its input on the language in this legislation. The study is crucial as a first step, but obviously equally more important, in fact, is the outcome, and it needs to be done before the end of this decade. It must be completed before Plum Island's transition is done. I want to thank my colleagues, again, Senator Schumer, who has been totally dedicated to this cause, Senator Gillibrand and Senator Murphy for their co-sponsorship of this bill. It will have a lasting and historic effect because it enables Plum Island to become part of our federal resource protection ecosystem through the Department of Interior. And I urge that this study be conducted quickly, expeditiously, thoroughly, and within less than 5 years. Certainly, it's doable in a couple of years, and I would urge that the Department of Interior address it right away. And I urge my colleagues, or I thank my colleagues, for joining me in support of this bill. And I yield to the senior senator from Texas.
Madam President.
Senator from Texas.
Madam President, I thank my colleague from Connecticut for offering the unanimous consent request by which we passed these various bills. I just want to discuss the Big Bend National Park Boundary Act. Texas is home to a very diverse terrain, which includes vibrant wildlife and big wide open spaces. And Big Bend National Park is no exception. This legislation that we just passed by unanimous consent here in the Senate expands and preserves the park's heritage, its natural resources, and its jaw-dropping scenery, while also safeguarding private property rights. This bill authorizes the National Park Service to acquire approximately 6,100 acres of land adjacent to Terlingua Creek along the western boundary of the park. It clarifies that the National Park Service may only acquire land through donation, purchase from willing property owners, or exchange. And it explicitly prohibits the use of eminent domain or condemnation, thereby protecting private property rights. This legislation is important to helping Texans and all Americans enjoy our big, beautiful national parks, and I'm pleased that the Senate has adopted this legislation today by unanimous consent. I yield the floor.
Senator from Connecticut.